What happens when Tom Cruise's unstoppable energy meets Alejandro González Iñárritu's emotionally intense filmmaking? That's the question behind Digger. Cruise is famous for outrunning danger, while Iñárritu's films make you sit with it. When those worlds collide, the result isn't just a movie, it's a risky cinematic experiment. A movie that sounds like a dare. At first glance, Digger doesn't sound like a safe choice for anyone involved. It's described as a dark, surreal comedy about catastrophic consequences, power, and the illusion of control. That alone should make studio executives nervous. Adding Tom Cruise to that equation should make them extremely nervous. Not because he's unreliable, but because he's famous for precision, discipline, and control. This film, by design, seems to thrive on chaos. The premise centers on one man, widely described as the most powerful person on Earth, scrambling to prove he can save humanity before a disaster he himself helped unleash destroys everything. It's not subtle, it's not gentle, and it's very much a story about modern leadership, ego, and the desperate need to be seen as the hero even when you may be the villain. If that sounds uncomfortably familiar, that's probably intentional. Tom Cruise, but not the one you're used to. One of the most intriguing things about Digger is how aggressively it works against Tom Cruise's modern screen persona. This isn't Ethan Hunt saving the world through competence and commitment. This isn't Maverick defying age and gravity with perfect timing and a killer soundtrack. This is Cruise playing a character named Digger Rockwell, a name that sounds less like a savior and more like someone who definitely owns at least one questionable self-help book. Early teaser footage shows Cruise dancing awkwardly, clinging to fences, holding a shovel like it's either a symbol of power or a silent accusation. There are no explosions, no jets, no sprinting, and that absence is louder than any action sequence. It's a reminder that Cruise, despite his reputation, has always been at his best when he takes risks. Magnolia, Eyes Wide Shut, born on the 4th of July. Digger feels like a return to that version of Cruise, just filtered through the strange, anxious energy of the 2020s. Alejandro Iñárritu's return to English language chaos. For Alejandro González Iñárritu, Digger marks his first English language feature since The Revenant. That's important, because The Revenant wasn't just a film. It was a cinematic endurance test that left audiences cold, exhausted, and weirdly grateful to be indoors. Since then, Iñárritu explored more personal, experimental territory, but Digger brings him back into the mainstream spotlight with a massive star and a major studio behind him. What's fascinating is how openly Iñárritu has described the project. He's called it terrifying, brutal, funny, and beautiful, sometimes all in the same sentence. That combination isn't marketing fluff, it's a warning label. Iñárritu doesn't make comfort movies. He makes movies that poke at identity, ego, and the stories we tell ourselves to survive. Giving him Tom Cruise, a global symbol of control, success, and cinematic invincibility, feels less like casting and more like provocation, a cast that signals serious intent. While Cruise and Iñárritu dominate the headlines, the supporting cast quietly signals that this isn't a vanity project or a one-man show. The film includes performers known for intensity, unpredictability, and emotional depth. Actors who don't just deliver lines, but dismantle them. This kind of ensemble suggests a story driven by interaction, conflict, and moral tension rather than spectacle. These are actors who thrive in uncomfortable silences and morally gray situations, which strongly hints that Digger isn't interested in easy answers. It wants conversations, it wants arguments, it wants characters who challenge the central figure rather than orbit him. Why the title Digger matters more than it sounds. At first, Digger sounds simple, almost silly, but titles matter, especially in Iñárritu's world. Digging is an act of discovery, but it's also an act of burial. You dig to find the truth, and you dig to hide it. You dig foundations, and you dig graves. The title alone hints at duality, creation and destruction, ambition and consequence. There's also something faintly ironic about watching Tom Cruise. Hollywood's ultimate upward climber, starring in a film named after an activity that goes in the opposite direction. It's subtle, it's symbolic, and it's the kind of irony Iñárritu enjoys playing with, even if it makes audiences slightly uncomfortable. Comedy, but not the laugh. Out loud kind. Calling Digger a comedy doesn't mean it's trying to be friendly. This isn't punchlines and pratfalls. It's the kind of comedy that sneaks up on you, makes you laugh, and then leaves you wondering whether you should feel bad about it. The humor reportedly comes from absurdity, contradiction, and the gap between how powerful people see themselves and how the world actually responds to them. In other words, it's comedy rooted in reality, which is often the funniest and most painful kind. Watching a man with unlimited power desperately try to convince everyone he's the solution to a problem he created feels less like fiction and more like an observational documentary with better lighting. A film made for this exact moment. It's impossible to separate Digger from the cultural moment it's entering. Audiences are increasingly skeptical of saviors, suspicious of grand promises, and deeply familiar with public figures insisting they alone can fix everything. This film doesn't arrive in a vacuum. It arrives in a world where trust is fragile and confidence often feels performative. That's what makes the pairing of Cruz and Iñárritu so potent. Cruz represents belief in systems, in preparation, in doing the work. Iñárritu represents doubt, fracture, and the emotional cost of believing too hard in your own narrative. Together, they create tension without even trying. The risk is the point. From a career standpoint, Digger is a gamble for everyone involved. Cruz doesn't need this movie to remain relevant. Iñárritu doesn't need a star to prove his artistic credibility. Warner Brothers doesn't need to bankroll a brutal, wild comedy in an era obsessed with predictable franchises. And yet, here it is. That's what makes Digger exciting. It exists because someone said yes to uncertainty, because someone decided that safety is overrated and that discomfort might be interesting. In an industry increasingly built on familiarity, this film feels like a deliberate step sideways, maybe even backward, just to see what happens. What we really want to know. At the heart of all the curiosity surrounding Digger is a simple question. Who is this movie really for? Is it for Cruz fans who want to see him stripped of invincibility? Is it for cinephiles who trust Iñárritu to challenge them? Is it for audiences exhausted by heroes and ready for something messier, stranger, and more honest? The answer is probably yes, and also no. Digger doesn't sound like it's trying to please everyone. It sounds like it's trying to say something, even if that something makes people uncomfortable, confused, or quietly impressed. A Tom Cruise movie you can't predict. The most telling thing about Digger isn't the plot, the cast, or even the director. It's the fact that nobody can quite agree on what it will feel like. That uncertainty is rare for a Tom Cruise project, and it's refreshing. It suggests a film that isn't engineered to perfection, but discovered through process. Maybe it will be hilarious. Maybe it will be disturbing. Maybe it will be both at the same time. What's clear is that Digger isn't about running away from disaster. It's about standing in the middle of it and realizing you might be the reason it exists. And that, ironically, might be the boldest stunt Tom Cruise has attempted in years. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Digger and the unexpected collision of Tom Cruise and Alejandro González Iñárritu, stick around. We break down the stories, risks, and ideas behind the biggest films shaping cinema today. If you want to be smarter every day, like and subscribe.